The house smelled of baked chicken and sugar cookies, and the sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed from the living room. Outside, the city glittered with faint fireworks, a celebration that should have been joyful. But inside, Mia felt cold, a hollow weight pressing on her chest. She had just stepped in from the chilly night, tired from a long day at work, hoping for a moment of rest, maybe even a little excitement for New Year's Eve. Instead, her mother's words struck her like ice. "Mia," her mother said sharply, standing in the hallway with arms crossed, "you're keeping the kids tonight. We've already made plans." Mia froze. Her heart skipped a beat. "Mom, tonight? It's New Year's Eve. I told you I wanted to go out." Her mother didn't flinch. Her eyes were steady, almost cold, as if Mia's wishes didn't matter at all. "You'll understand one day. Your sister needs a break." Mia's throat tightened. Her sister Lena always seemed to have life figured out, always chosen, always favored. And Mia? She had been the reliable one, the one who stepped aside, the one who was supposed to manage everything so the others could live carefree. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the first year. But this time, the disappointment hit hard. A sharp sting that woke something dark and stubborn inside her. Lena breezed past, toddlers clinging to her skirts. She handed the little ones to Mia as if passing off parcels. "Thanks, Mia," she said lightly, not noticing the tension, not acknowledging the exhaustion in Mia's eyes. The words were casual, almost dismissive, but they carried an invisible weight. Years of being the overlooked sibling pressed down on her. She smiled, forced, as though it covered the storm brewing inside her. That the seed of something else had been planted. The seed of revenge, not violent, not cruel. Just a quiet, simmering desire to reclaim herself. For years, she had been the backup plan, the caretaker, the invisible one. Tonight, though, she realized she didn't have to be invisible anymore. She sat by the window, watching fireworks bloom over the city skyline, their colors reflecting in her eyes. She listened to the distant cheer and felt herself detached from the celebration. The people outside were celebrating life, while she counted the cost of her own. The kids were asleep in the room next to her. Their tiny breathing rhythms were calm, innocent, oblivious. They didn't know she had been used. They didn't know that the adults who claimed to love them had overlooked her, dismissed her needs, and treated her like she existed only to serve. The thought made her chest ache. Mia remembered every instance, every New Year's Eve, every holiday, every family event. She had been the one to stay behind when everyone else went out. She had been the one to plan, clean, and ensure the fun went smoothly while her own desires were sidelined. And Lena? Lena was always praised for taking the night off, for resting, for enjoying the fun. Her mother never saw the imbalance, never questioned the way they relied on Mia. She thought about how her mother had smiled that same cold, firm smile. Countless times, assigning responsibility with a casual authority, as though Mia had no voice, no right to protest. And suddenly, the realization hit. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about years of being treated as expendable. And that recognition burned, a slow fire that demanded attention. Mia's mind shifted. She began analyzing the situation with clarity she hadn't allowed herself before. She wasn't just tired. She was angry. She wasn't just frustrated. She was hurt. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no explosions of conflict, but the betrayal was real. They didn't see her as a person with her own life, her own desires, her own worth. They saw her as a tool, a constant resource to manage their world. And tools, if used too much, break. She thought about the future. Every time she had complied, she had given up something for someone else's convenience. Every smile she had forced, every sacrifice she had made, had been taken for granted. And yet, here she was, expected to bend once more, to ignore her own needs, to continue the cycle. The seed of revenge that had been planted now began to grow. Not revenge in the sense of cruelty or malice. Not to hurt the children, who were innocent. Not even to humiliate her sister or mother, but a quiet, purposeful reclaiming of herself. A mental promise that she would no longer allow others to define her worth. A determination that she could step out of the shadows and assert her life, her choices, her limits. Mia sat on the couch, letting the fire of indignation and clarity mingle. She remembered every small slight, every time her mother assumed she would step in, every casual expectation, every moment she had smiled through exhaustion and frustration. It all boiled into a quiet rage that was precise, not loud, but powerful. As the night crept toward midnight, she reflected on what she had allowed. She realized that resentment had been growing like a shadow in her mind, quiet and persistent. Until tonight it had reached a point where it demanded action. She didn't yet know how she would act, but she felt the possibility of reclaiming herself. Even keeping the kids tonight, even sacrificing this evening, wouldn't stop her. It wouldn't erase the past, but it could mark the beginning of her. Understanding that her own life had value. And then she thought of Lena, blissfully unaware, enjoying her freedom, oblivious to the effort Mia had poured into making everything seamless. Lena hadn't intentionally hurt her. She simply didn't know. And yet, ignorance didn't absolve responsibility. Mia realized that part of her desire for revenge wasn't about revenge at all. It was about respect, about recognition, about finally asserting that she had a voice and she would use it. The fireworks outside grew louder. The laughter inside the house swelled. Mia watched it all, separate yet connected. She wasn't angry at the children. She wasn't even fully angry at Lena. She was angry at the system that had allowed her own family to overlook her, to treat her like she was secondary. And that anger, sharp and clear, became her fuel. By the time midnight approached, the kids slept peacefully. The house was full of noise, and Mia sat in the quiet of the hallway. She felt something shift. The seed of revenge had sprouted, but not in the way she had feared. It wasn't bitterness alone. It wasn't malice. It was awareness. It was clarity. It was the understanding that her life, her time, her feelings mattered, and that she could act on that knowledge. Tonight, New Year's Eve, wasn't just another night. It was the night she realized she had been invisible for too long. It was the night she saw the truth of her place in her family's life. And it was the night she made the first silent, private promise to herself. She would no longer be walked over. She would no longer allow others to dictate her worth. The quiet resolve settled over her, heavier than the weight of the house, stronger than the sounds of celebration, and more enduring than the fireworks outside. This was only the beginning. But it was enough. The betrayal had lit the spark, and now Mia would find the way forward. A path not built on hatred, but on the reclamation of herself. The seed of revenge, small and subtle, had been planted. And as the clock struck 12, Mia smiled softly. To herself, for the first time in a long while, knowing she had begun to reclaim her life. The days after New Year's passed with a strange quiet, almost deceptive. Mia went through her routine, but everything felt heavier, sharper, as if she was seeing her world in high definition for the first time. The laughter at family dinners no longer warmed her. It grated. The casual assumptions, the unspoken expectations, the way her family treated her like she was always available, all of it hit harder now. She watched her mother and sister in their routines. Lena effortlessly enjoying life while Mia managed. Behind the scenes, invisible. It wasn't just exhaustion she felt anymore. It was anger, simmering and steady. A quiet storm she could no longer ignore. She found herself replaying New Year's Eve over and over. Her mother's firm words, Lena's careless smile, the way the toddlers clung to her, as though she existed only to serve. Each memory sharpened the sense of betrayal. Mia knew revenge wasn't about destruction, not yet. She wasn't thinking of screaming, slamming doors, or humiliating them. Her revenge would be quiet, precise. It would be her reclaiming herself, asserting her presence, proving that she was not just a shadow in their lives. But the plan wasn't easy. She wrestled with herself constantly, torn between guilt and righteousness, between anger and the faint whisper of compassion. She spent hours alone in her apartment, watching her reflection in the window, as if trying to recognize the person she had been, and the person she could become. There was pain in her eyes, yes, but also fire. For years, she had let others define her, shape her life, and decide her priorities. Now, she understood that she had power, and the first rule of power was knowing your worth. Lena called one afternoon. Her voice was casual, friendly, unaware of the storm within Mia. "Hey Mia, Mom said you're free Saturday. Can you watch the kids again?" The words hit Mia like a punch. Her stomach tightened, and a slow smile of realization spread across her face. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. A test, a chance to assert herself. Her first instinct was to say yes, like she always had, to follow the invisible rules she had lived by for years. But no. She could feel the new Mia forming, one who could say no without fear. She walked around her apartment, holding her phone like a small talisman, thinking about what saying no would mean. Would her mother get angry? Would Lena cry? Would it ruin the fragile peace in their family? Perhaps. But the thought of saying yes and slipping back into the old cycle felt like betrayal. A betrayal of herself. Mia began to plan. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, but a mental strategy. She would say no. She would set boundaries. She would assert her needs. She would make them see that she was not just an extension of their convenience. The plan felt small, almost too simple. But to Mia, it was revolutionary. It was power in its purest form. The power to protect her time, her emotions, her life. The struggle within her intensified with every passing day. She doubted her constantly. Could she truly say no? Would they understand? Did she even deserve to reclaim her life? The questions spun around in her head, relentless, demanding answers she didn't yet have. Every time she thought about her sister's carefree smile or her mother's firm, unquestioning tone, the anger flared anew. It was not a destructive anger, but a focused one, like steel being forged. Mia's mind also wandered to what revenge might feel like, not the small, boundary-setting kind she was planning, but the darker fantasies that flitted through her thoughts in the quiet moments. She imagined Lena struggling, feeling even a fraction of the pressure Mia had carried for years. She imagined her mother realizing how much they had taken for granted. But each time she pulled back. That wasn't her goal. She didn't want pain. She wanted recognition, respect, balance. She wanted to see herself valued, not to see them punished. Every interaction with her family became a test. She observed them closely, noting patterns she had ignored before. How Lena never asked how Mia was doing. How her mother assumed she was always free. How each small favor she performed was taken for granted. It hurt, but it also clarified her purpose. She had been complicit in her own invisibility by staying silent, by saying yes out of habit. Now she would reclaim her voice. Mia practiced saying no in front of the mirror. The word felt strange at first, foreign and heavy. No, she whispered. I won't do it. I'm not available. She repeated it until it felt natural, until it carried the weight of certainty rather than guilt. She realized that saying no wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. It was the first step toward freedom. As Saturday approached, tension built inside her like a coiled spring. Every time her phone buzzed, every casual call from her mother or sister, her heart raced. She knew the moment of truth was near. She visualized the confrontation, prepared for their surprise, their possible guilt-tripping, their disbelief. She wasn't going to back down. She WLDN single quotes T. By Friday evening, Mia's mind was a battlefield of emotion. Excitement, fear, and empowerment mingled in equal measure. She wasn't plotting harm. She was preparing to assert herself. This was her quiet revenge, her way of reclaiming control over a life that had long been defined by others. She spent the night rehearsing, imagining the conversation, predicting every reaction, weighing every option. Her mind worked like a strategist, her heart pounding with anticipation. She reflected on the nature of revenge as she prepared. Many people imagined revenge as dramatic, loud, damaging. But Mia's kind of revenge was subtle. It was the act of saying yes to herself for the first time. It was reclaiming hours, choices, dignity. She realized that this form of revenge carried more weight than any dramatic act, because it transformed her from a victim to an agent of her own life. Sleep eluded her. She paced the apartment, replaying conversations from New Year's Eve, anticipating the next encounter. Each memory strengthened her resolve. She remembered the cold indifference in her mother's voice, the casual entitlement in Lena's smile, the way her own needs had been ignored for years. That memory was no longer a source of pain alone. It had become fuel. By Saturday morning, Mia felt a strange calm settle over her. The tension was still there, but it was tempered by clarity. She had rehearsed, she had prepared, she had accepted the consequences of her choice. Today, she would assert herself. Today, she would see if her family could finally recognize her worth. As she dressed and prepared for the inevitable confrontation, she felt the thrill of empowerment. For years, she had acted out of habit, expectation, and guilt. Now, she acted from intention, from self-respect, from the desire to finally be seen. The revenge she had planned wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. It was hers. Mia left her apartment with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't going to yell, argue, or storm out. She wasn't going to seek to humiliate. She was going to stand firm, and in that act she would reclaim herself. The quiet storm inside her had become a deliberate force. She felt alive in a way she hadn't before. As she approached her family's house, the familiar sounds of laughter and chaos hit her ears. The contrast between their casual joy and her focused resolve was sharp. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment she had trained for, imagined, and longed for. The moment she would finally put herself first. And in that moment, as the door opened and her mother and sister appeared, Mia knew she was ready. The revenge she had built, quiet and precise, was about to begin. Not with malice, not with cruelty, but with the power of one simple word. No. Saturday arrived with a strange tension in the air, thick and palpable, like a storm waiting to break. Mia could feel her heart pounding as she walked up the familiar steps to her family's house. Each footstep seemed heavier than the last. weighted with years of unspoken frustration, overlooked sacrifices, and quiet resentment. She wasn't angry for the sake of anger. She wasn't here to punish. She was here to reclaim herself, to stand up for the life she had long ignored in favor of others' convenience. The door opened before she could knock. There they were, her mother, poised and expectant, and Lena, smiling lightly, holding the kids by the hand as if this was all normal. "Mia," her mother said briskly, voice sharp with assumption. "We need you to keep them today." Something came up. Mia froze for a heartbeat, then took a deep breath. The words she had practiced for days formed clearly in her mind. She had rehearsed them in the mirror, in the quiet of her apartment, in every corner of her life. And now, faced with the moment, the weight of it pressed down on her chest, almost heavy enough to make her falter. Almost. "I can't," she said, steadying her voice. Her mother blinked, the confident mask faltering for just a moment. "What?" "I said I can't watch them today," Mia repeated, her voice firmer this time. Each word carried the weight of years spent bending to others' expectations. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it resonated. Lena's smile wavered. "Why are you being difficult? You always help." "That's exactly the problem," Mia said, stepping into the living room, feeling the surge of courage push her forward. "I always help, and none of you ever consider how I feel. None of you ever ask what I want or need. I'm done being the backup plan." Her mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, Mia saw hesitation, confusion, a flicker of understanding, maybe even guilt. She had expected anger, maybe a guilt trip, maybe shouting. But what she saw instead was the first crack in the wall that had long separated her from them. "You're really saying no?" her mother whispered, almost like she was tasting an unfamiliar word. "Yes," Mia said, firm and unwavering. "I love you. I always will. But I won't sacrifice my life, my time, my choices for you anymore. Not at the expense of myself." The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, but it was real. The kids looked up at her, confused but innocent. Their eyes held no judgment, only trust. That clarity gave Mia a strange calm, a reminder that her choice wasn't cruel. It was necessary. She wasn't punishing anyone. She was asserting herself. She was reclaiming her power. Her mother finally exhaled, a long, thoughtful sound. Maybe we haven't treated you fairly," she admitted softly. "I didn't realize. I didn't understand how much we relied on you without appreciating it." Mia's chest swelled with relief, but not triumph. She wasn't here to be vindicated or celebrated. She was here to be seen, to be recognized, as someone who mattered, not just as someone who served. Lena shifted uncomfortably, still silent, perhaps processing the first moment in years where her sister refused to bend. There was no drama, no shouting, but the tension itself was transformative. The kids clung to Mia's hands, innocent and warm. Their presence reminded her of why she had always cared so much, why she had sacrificed, why she had bent to the will of others. And yet, it also reminded her why she couldn't keep doing it. Love didn't mean losing herself. Caring didn't mean disappearing. And protecting her own boundaries wasn't cruelty. It was survival. Mia's mind drifted for a moment, considering the weight of her choice. She had built the anticipation over weeks, wrestled with fear and guilt, visualized every possible reaction. She had rehearsed anger, tears, disappointment. And now none of that mattered. What mattered was the simplicity of her decision. No. 2 letters, full of consequence and power. Her mother's expression softened further. I see that now. I didn't want to rely on you like that. And I didn't even realize it. The words were small, but they were real, and that was enough for Mia. Recognition didn't erase the past, but it was a start. Lena finally spoke, hesitating. I didn't know it felt like that for you, she admitted quietly. I always assumed you were okay with it. You never said anything. Mia nodded, understanding the truth in her sister's words. She hadn't said anything because she had been taught to keep quiet, to help, to sacrifice. But that silence had been her chains, and today she broke them. I wasn't okay, she said. I was hurt, I was exhausted. And I'm done ignoring that. Her mother and sister didn't argue. They didn't protest. They just listened. And in that moment, Mia felt the quiet power of her decision settle over her like a cloak. She had chosen herself, and that choice carried weight. When the conversation ended and her mother and sister left, taking the kids with them, Mia closed the door behind them. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel guilty. She felt relief. She felt the clarity that came from finally acting for herself, finally asserting her boundaries, finally reclaiming her life. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the faint sounds of the city outside, the echoes of fireworks from New Year's still lingering in the distance. She reflected on what had just happened, understanding that revenge wasn't always about hurting others. Sometimes it was about choosing yourself, standing up for your own worth, and refusing to be invisible any longer. Mia realized that her quiet, deliberate form of revenge had been far more powerful than any dramatic act could have been. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't yelled, she hadn't humiliated anyone. She had simply chosen herself. And in that choice, she had found clarity, peace, and strength. The day ended not with celebration, but with a sense of accomplishment. The storm inside her had settled into a calm she hadn't known existed. She had faced the people who had relied on her without recognition, and she had stood firm. She had not sought to punish. She had sought to heal herself, and in that act she had reclaimed something far more valuable than revenge itself: respect, self-worth, and the freedom to live on her own terms. As evening fell and the city lights blinked in the distance, Mia sat by her window, letting the silence wrap around her. She thought about the future and how things might change, knowing it wouldn't be perfect, knowing there would be challenges. But she also knew she had discovered a truth she had never fully embraced. Boundaries were powerful, and saying no could be revolutionary. Mia's story that day wasn't one of vengeance or malice. It was a story of empowerment, of reclaiming oneself in a world that often overlooks those who serve silently. She understood now that revenge, when used to hurt others, could be destructive. But revenge, when used to protect yourself, to assert your worth, to set boundaries, that kind of revenge could be transformative. And for the first time in a long time, Mia welcomed the idea of tomorrow not with fear or resentment, but with hope. She had faced her past, confronted her family, and chosen herself. That choice had changed her. It had given her power. It had given her clarity. She smiled softly, closing her eyes for a moment, knowing that the quiet revolution she had waged inside her own life was more significant than any loud act of retaliation. She had learned that revenge doesn't have to be destructive to be powerful. Sometimes the most profound revenge is simply living fully, on your own terms, and refusing to let others define your worth. Mia had done exactly that. And as the night deepened, she felt a calm she had never known, a quiet victory that no one could take away. She had chosen herself, and in that choice, she had truly won.